Chapter 1. Zeus, the tyrant supreme god and his paranoia. We think we know Zeus. He is the king of the gods, the ruler of Olympus, the great thunder god who established order after overthrowing the Titans. Zeus is the ultimate symbol of supreme power, divine justice, and grandeur. But if we discard the polished stories written by poets who glorify the regime and look at the earliest ancient texts, a colder, darker truth emerges. Zeus was not a just thunder god. He was a paranoid tyrant who built his reign on betrayal, fear, and relentless violence. Zeus's rule was founded on a violent premise. He overthrew his father, Cronus, who had previously overthrown his own father, Uranus. This was not merely a replacement of power. It was a cycle of generational violence that Zeus promised to end. Yet, after his victory, Zeus did not end the cycle. He reinforced it with his own tyrannical actions. The Titanomachia, war with the Titans, was a victory, but it was also a brutal political purge, where the losers were banished to the abyss of Tartarus forever, a punishment that was absolute and unforgiving. Zeus's reign was solidified not by wisdom, but by paranoia. Zeus was constantly terrified of prophecy, that his son would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his father. This fear became the driving force, turning Zeus into a tyrannical and ruthless god who never hesitated to use his absolute power to control every potential threat. He monitored goddesses, nymphs, and even mortals, constantly seeking signs of rebellion. This paranoia is the hidden motive behind many of his most brutal actions. A prime example is his treatment of Prometheus, the titan who dared to steal fire and give it to mankind. Prometheus's act was not just disobedience. It was the enlightenment of knowledge for the human race, an act that Zeus perceived as a direct threat to the gods' absolute monopoly on power. The punishment Zeus inflicted upon Prometheus was ritualistic and eternal. Chained to a rock, with an eagle perpetually consuming his liver. This was not justice. This was an act of psychological terrorism intended to warn anyone who dared challenge Olympus's dominance over intellect and power. Zeus's tyranny is further evidenced by how he controlled and oppressed women. Most stories involving Zeus and goddesses, nymphs, or mortals are not romantic. They are acts of pursuit, coercion, and sexual assault committed through absolute power. Zeus did not use persuasion. He used transformation into a swan, a bull, or a shower of gold to bypass moral consent and refusal. Worse still, when these women became pregnant or caused trouble, Zeus would often abandon them or let his wife, Hera, brutally punish them. Zeus, the king of the gods, frequently pushed his wife into the role of the enforcer and punisher, while he escaped responsibility and simultaneously asserted his male dominance over the divine and mortal realms. In summary, Zeus was not the just king of Olympus. He was a paranoid tyrant who used violence, coercion, and fear to maintain his reign. The brutal punishment of Prometheus, the coercion of women, and the ceaseless paranoia against his own children all serve as evidence that his rule rested upon the foundation of generational violence that he never truly broke. Chapter 2. The Loop of Destruction, Maintaining Rule Through Paranoia. If Chapter 1 exposed the violent foundation of Zeus's power, Chapter 2 delves into how he maintained that power, paranoia and psychological manipulation that destroyed his own family. Zeus's rule over Olympus was not maintained by affection, but by calculated fear. Zeus's greatest obsession was a prophecy, that his son would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown Cronus. This fear was a secret engine that turned Zeus into a paranoid and ruthless king, who trusted no one, including his closest kin. To avert this prophecy, Zeus committed some of the most appalling acts of mythology, all aimed at controlling his progeny. The tragedy of Metis, the goddess of wisdom, serves as a prime example. Metis was Zeus's first wife, and the only one capable of bearing a child who could potentially surpass him. Instead of facing the prophecy wisely, Zeus resorted to deception. He coerced Metis and swallowed her whole while she was pregnant. This act was the appropriation of the generative power and the seizing of wisdom from the wise goddess. Zeus didn't just kill Metis, he absorbed her, asserting that all supreme knowledge and wisdom must originate from him alone. The subsequent birth of Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, from Zeus's head was merely a stage event to legitimize this usurpation, a declaration that supreme intellect could only be produced by the male body. This paranoia extended to his own children. Zeus constantly controlled and suppressed demigods, as they were figures capable of transcending human limits and threatening the Olympian order. The treatment of Heracles is a case study. Heracles, Zeus's son with the mortal woman Alcmene, symbolized invincible strength. But instead of protecting his son, Zeus allowed his jealous wife, Hera, to persecute Heracles with endless labors and trials. Zeus's failure to intervene in Hera's revenge was not impotence. It was a sophisticated political manipulation. Zeus delegated Hera the role of the enforcer and punisher, allowing him to escape direct responsibility and mitigate the threat posed by his own powerful son without doing the dirty work himself. In doing so, he maintained his supreme power while controlling Heracles' development, all while preserving his image of fairness before the divine council. Zeus's cruelty is also manifested in his treatment of Hera herself. Hera was not just a victim of deception. She was a prisoner in a marriage established as political oppression. The marriage was founded on a power struggle between a male sky god, Zeus, and a goddess with older origins, Hera, who governed marriage and childbirth. Hera's jealousy was a direct consequence of the injustice and power seizure committed by Zeus. Zeus continuously betrayed Hera, not out of mere passion, but to assert his ultimate authority, demonstrating that the rules of marriage and morality did not apply to the king of the gods. In conclusion, Zeus's rule was not maintained by love or justice. It was maintained by paranoia, generational violence, and psychological manipulation veiled beneath the appearance of the just thunder god. The sacrifice of Metis, the suppression of Heracles, and the humiliation of Hera are all evidence that Zeus built his kingdom on fear. Chapter 3. The Destructive Legacy, the Collapse of Absolute Power. If Chapter 2 exposed how Zeus used paranoia to manipulate his family, Chapter 3 assesses the overall legacy left by this tyrannical rule, a legacy of destruction and fear that permeated both the Olympian order and the human psyche. Zeus built an empire on tyranny, and that empire, though outwardly solid, was perpetually susceptible to internal rot. Zeus's dominion was not limited to Olympus. He intervened in human affairs not with benevolence, but with caprice and selfishness. His decisions were often instantaneous reactions to challenges, not fair judgments. When humans became too arrogant or challenged divine authority, Zeus punished them with mass destruction, such as the great deluge that wiped out most of humanity. This was the action of an absolutely unaccountable king, who viewed humanity as pawns to be discarded when they no longer served his purpose. The story of Io, one of the many women coerced by Zeus, illustrates this cruelty. To hide the affair from Hera, Zeus transformed Io into a white heifer. However, upon discovery, Hera demanded the cow and commanded Argus, the hundred-eyed giant, to guard Io. Even after Hermes killed Argus, Hera did not relent but sent a gadfly to perpetually sting and torment her, forcing her to wander the world in agony. Crucially, Zeus, the supreme god, never directly intervened to end this torment. He indirectly caused the tragedy, then stood by while Io suffered indefinitely. This inaction is evidence that Zeus's rule was based on the principle, as long as his power was not threatened, individual suffering was irrelevant. Zeus's legacy is also one of divine duality. To appease conflicting forces or to consolidate his power, he allowed gods with discordant origins, like Dionysus, the god of wine and chaos, to join Olympus. However, this acceptance was not harmony. It was manipulation and control of chaotic elements, ensuring that change could only happen under his explicit permission. His paranoia created a dynasty lacking genuine trust and true collaboration. Ultimately, Zeus's dominance created a vicious cycle of violence and challenge. Although he successfully prevented the Titans and his children from overthrowing him, his reign set a precedent. Supreme power can only be gained through violence and betrayal. It is this very legacy that sowed mistrust and potential rebellion into the hearts of subsequent gods and heroes. The final conclusion is that Zeus, the thunder god, is a symbol of a naked truth. When absolute power is placed in the hands of an individual driven by fear and paranoia, it will destroy everything around it to preserve itself. His kingship is an eternal warning about the cost of tyranny. The truth is always stranger than the legend.